Okay.
All right, we're gonna admit some folks here. Got 9 waiting, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Carolina Wheat, curator at Artfare. I'm here on our weekly series. Tonight, we're lucky enough to have Selenas Mountain, Michael Fleming, and Olivia Swider here. The dynamic duo run a gallery in Ridgewood, Queens. It's a fantastic space. It's dedicated specifically to thematic group exhibitions. However, it doesn't, they're not stopped by doing poetry readings and different film screenings, and are certainly engaged in their community and the greater New York area with their expertise. I do welcome you. Thank you so much for being here to present the exhibition and tell us a little bit about your story on the Jester Plays Dead.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
I guess to start things off, we want to say thank you to Artfare and to Carolina for having us here. We're very excited to join you guys all virtually, even though we can't meet physically. So thanks all the folks that are logging on via Zoom, via Instagram, and wherever else you're joining from. So I guess to start things off, we can speak a little bit about how our gallery came to be. One thing that's important to note is that our gallery and the name actually comes from 2 separate galleries that existed before this. So I'll speak about my gallery and you can speak about yours. So originally I started a gallery in Bushwick off the Bogart Seagull stop near the Bogart building called Mountain. And it was an apartment gallery that ran for about 2 years. And it was an exhibition space inside of an apartment that used the front living room for group exhibitions, solo exhibitions, and other events. And I ran that space for about 2 years. And during that time span, I met Olivia and we started dating. And Olivia had a separate apartment gallery that she started, so I'll let her speak about that.
The space I ran was called Selena, and it was off of Myrtle Broadway, over in a different part of Bushwick than Mountain was in. And that program was geared to focusing on artists of color. And the exhibition space was in my living room, very tall ceilings, lots of windows, and a lot of great shows that we had.
And we actually met each other at Elijah Wheat's showroom. So our union is thanks to Liz and Carolina and the great exhibitions that you guys put on that brought together great people like us. And it was just kind of a really funny situation because I had already been running my gallery for I think one or 2 seasons, and then Olivia was starting her gallery, and that became a strong talking point, but then also an excuse to invite Olivia over to check out my apartment gallery, and we just kind of hit it off right away. So in the course of our dating, everything was always kind of tied up in exhibitions and curating, and I would help her with her shows, and she would help me with my shows. So eventually we decided to combine forces, and that's how we created Selenas Mountain. We decided instead of giving up our 2 excellent names, we just combine them and make something new. So that's where the name comes from. And we also decided that, once we moved out of our old apartments, instead of, looking for a new apartment space, we decided to just have a separate gallery space. So this space that we're sitting in now is actually a commercial space over in Ridgewood, Queens. And for us, it's kind of like taking the next step in our apartment gallery phase. We like to think of ourselves as a commercial gallery that has a apartment gallery ethos, trying to support younger emerging artists and do interesting, innovative things, but still have that commercial side, being able to have exhibitions, be more professional, sell work, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. I had a question for you guys. Each of you come from an apartment gallery, coming together, having Selenas Mountain. However, each name is pretty specific to your curatorial style. And I was wondering if you could each just give us one maybe sentence or 2 max on, what mountain means to you, Michael, and what Selenas means to you, Olivia.
I'll let Olivia go first.
When I started Selena, I started it with my friend Anjali Rathard, who is an amazing painter. And at the time, we both wanted to focus on working on exhibitions with artists of color. And I think the idea was to, name the gallery after someone's name that wasn't involved. And so the gallery is named after Selena Quintanilla, who is the late pop star from Texas. J-Lo played her in the great biopic. But so that was sort of that idea, and she is such a cult fan base. I knew that people would remember, you know, our email or that name when we were applying to things, sending out, you know, emails for studio visits, things like that. So it just kind of stuck.
And then for me, Mountain came about because I was juggling a few different names, and instead of having a name that was very specific, I like the idea of having a name that's kind of general, that people could kind of put their own meaning on. And I like the idea of Mountain, both in the sense that it could be very grandiose and monstrous, gigantic, or it could be very humble and, you know, nature and beauty. So I feel like people bring different associations to that name, and it starts to accrue meaning over time. So for me, Mountain, you know, was all about kind of the empty vessel and what can be put into it. And I also was afraid of heights growing up, so I thought that Mountain would be a good overcoming of fears.
That's very, very nice, very divergent ideas that come together in this fantastic space. And your shows have been really well received. You've gotten some outstanding press since, you know, prior to the merge and during the merge now. And this show is fantastic. And I'd love to hear more about the conceptual promise that's within the intention of this show, and how you brought these three incredible kind of, you know, spiritually adjacent visual glyph makers together.
Yeah, very well put. Yeah, we'll give a quick tour of the show in a minute, but I think just to speak about the title. So for anyone that's just logging on, the exhibition is titled "The Jester Plays Dead," and it has three different artists: Dan Rizzo Orr, who's based out of Chicago; Edward Salas, who's based out of upstate New York; and Seneca Weintraub, who's from Philadelphia. And the title "The Jester Plays Dead" is really meant to be playing with the idea of the artist as a jester, a trickster, a clown, and the idea of painting specifically being this medium that people have said time and time again throughout art history as something that is dead. The multiple deaths of painting, the idea that this medium has run its course or is no longer relevant. And I think that one of the things we were talking about in wanting to do a painting show, whereas in the past we always try to have very diverse media, you know, diversity of the type of artists that we work with. In doing a painting show, we wanted to pick some artists that had a very unique vision and that played with this idea that painting can never truly be dead, that it's only playing dead. So I think that's kind of the conceptual underpinning of the exhibition. And the artists that we picked all have kind of a unique storytelling through their abstraction, their mark making, their materials. So even though the individual works themselves are very diverse, there's something in kind of the tone, as you said, kind of like the way they play off of each other.
There's specific symbolism that each artist is working with, as you'll see once we give a walkthrough.
Yeah. So maybe we'll take a pause here and just give a quick tour of the gallery, and we're going to just read the press release while we do that. So
yeah, just a bit of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so The Jester Plays Dead. So Selenas Mountain is pleased to present The Jester Plays Dead, featuring works by Dan Rizzo Orr, Edward Salas, and Seneca Weintraub. The exhibition pulls together three artists whose practices weave through shape, figurative abstraction, and gallows humor. These distinct voices explore an amalgam of archetypes through visual storytelling and material composition. The host of characters in this work blend into an overarching motif of the jester and the idea of the painting as a riddle. Rehearsed as a backward journey, the mental gymnastics of the comedic alchemist transforms tragedy into entertainment and sadness into laughter.
while you're moving through the show, the paintings are very vibrant. I'm so happy to see them up close and steady on the Zooms. It's a little tricky. But the work, as you're moving through, could you just highlight the name of each artist you're looking at, please?
Yeah, I can do it. So this is Edward Salas's work, these three paintings that we see here, right when you walk into the gallery on the left, and just trying to highlight the texture. So it's burlap and rope and acrylic. This one is definitely one of my favorites. As you go further into it, you can see there's this couple sleeping underneath this spider, and then the male figure at the top there. This is Seneca Weintraub. And these are encaustic on birch panel. It's kind of silly figure here. And here is Dan Rizzo Orr, which is linen and paper, linen and tape. And these two are also Seneca Weintraub. So this is a very large painting. You can see the figures in there. And this is also Seneca Weintraub. What is this called again? Do you remember? So I'm just gonna flip the camera back around.
Animal Child.
That last painting, the green one, is called Animal Child. So there's a lot of themes that they're all three working with separately that you can sort of see. For Dan Rizzo Orr, there's a lot of kites and doubling in that way. And
yeah, I think for Seneca's work, Seneca Weintraub, he has the wax encaustic and the other oil paint works. There's something very kind of almost like folk art or outsider art, but with his own spin on it. So the figures in a lot of those works has kind of an outsider, outdoorsman, frontiersman kind of vibe to it. I think in the press release we mentioned Grizzly Man, this kind of rugged outdoor hero who's kind of
living in a log cabin.
Yeah, like an anti-hero frontiersman.
In the middle of nowhere, Philly.
Yeah, yeah, and
Pennsylvania.
yeah, so I think that for Seneca's work, there's definitely almost like a drug-induced journey that the viewer goes on. So one of the pieces is called Time Fishing, and it's just kind of this stretched out human figure with a weird, blue landscape, background, mountains, river. Yeah.
I noticed that a lot of the paintings of the three painters in the show, potentially Rizzo Orr, I didn't notice too close of it. They have the relief quality to their paintings, so whether the caustic or the oil pens or this highly charged hand that provides this kind of loose relief on the painting. Were you considering that while you were putting the works together, or was formalism a part of this these connections in the curatorial vision, or was it predominantly about some of the folkloric, phantasmagoric it's like, so there's two different both formalities of the painting styles feel really adjacent to each other, but then also the concept does as well. Could you speak a little to that?
Yeah, I think from a curatorial standpoint, the subject matter was the first thing that kind of brought all these artists together. And then the materialism was kind of a happy accident. Like, we didn't realize how textural all the various works were going to be, and textural in a very unique way. So for instance, Edward Salas's work, which is probably the most relief, almost like sculpture, but they're paintings. He uses rope, he uses burlap, acrylic, different like resin droplets and things like that. So he definitely employed relief as a strategy. And when we first saw the works, we actually did it as a virtual studio visit. So we couldn't even tell how palpable they would be in person. But then he worked them over so much, and when he brought them over to drop them off for the exhibition, we were kind of struck by how textural and how three-dimensional they were. And that really played well with Dan Rizzo-Orr's work, which is so flat, but then even with the flatness, there is a texture to it because it's on linen, there's paper. So when you get close to those works that look very
really
graphic,
delicate folds
yeah,
that are hard to see from any of the photography of the works. You really have to see them in person to see that.
Yeah, and then finally with Seneca's work, especially the wax and caustic ones, there's a certain texture that's really hard to quantify. You know, it's something that when you see it, you just want to touch it, which for me, that's always a sign of a really good painting. And yeah, I think there's a texture, material quality that we didn't anticipate when we first curated the exhibition that I think was a happy accident, but then as the show started to kind of marinate, it became
it's sort of
really
it's
important.
like a wide range. You know, it starts from being very textural to sort of collapsing to being more delicate, more, you know, hard to catch those details, and then sort of back again, which is, if you walk through the show, the more textural paintings are sort of bookended in a way. When we have Dan Rizzo-Orr on the back wall there, so.
Yeah, the work is fantastically vibrant, and it works well together. I have a question on Instagram Live. They said, I don't know if you're all taking questions, but I'm very interested in the conversation about post-COVID art world and how artists will need to navigate that. And, you know, maybe as you address that answer, I also wanted to ask a bit about each artist is located in a different location, if I remember correctly. None of these are Brooklyn based, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I think art after COVID-19 or art during COVID-19, it's a very strange time because in one respect, you know, people might be at home and have more time, more freedom to create art. But a lot of artists that we know aren't able to visit their studio, aren't able to work with the same materials that they're used to. And we actually did an artist talk on Monday with photographer Carlos Jaramillo. That was really great, where he talked about, you know, what it's like to be a photographer and making work during this time and during quarantine. And one of the key topics that we brought up is, you know, how do you make do with what you have, whether that be physical space, an abundance of time, a lack of materials,
or a lack of time.
Or a lack of time, yeah.
Some people are working harder, some people have lost their jobs, you know.
Yeah.
Or having to work harder.
Yeah, and even if you do have time, how do you struggle with this pressure to be productive? You know, when at the end of the day, we're all surviving through a global pandemic, and that in itself is something to be proud of, to be appreciative of. So how do you go beyond just kind of, you know, if you have like a hierarchy of needs, now, you know, surviving a global pandemic is the baseline of that. That's, you know, just getting toilet paper, just getting food, and then being creative on top of that is a struggle, I think, for a lot of people. So one thing I would say to artists that are working right now is, you know, try to do the best with what you have, but don't be too hard on yourself. And I think for us, the way that it is impacting our gallery right now and how it will impact our gallery in the future, it's hard to quantify, but you know, it's definitely a big hit when we can't have people come to our physical gallery space. We can't make connections and, you know, have artists meet each other in this social, you know, aspect that we used to have. And yeah, I think it's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard question to answer, but I agree with not being too hard on yourself in any creative endeavor at the moment. But I mean, I think denial is probably the best place you can go in your head at this point for like anything that's going on. It'd just be easier just to get some work done, whatever that means to you, and just not think too hard about what's happening, because it's kind of, I don't know, with the anxiety that I have, it's like, it's just overwhelming. Like even getting over to the gallery today, it's, you know, it's a lot of work. It's just more work to leave your house, go get groceries, all the small things that were easy to do. It just takes more energy than it did before. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really speaks to the collective consciousness right now. And you hear, as we're going through almost 50 days of quarantine here in New York City, maybe the guilt of frustration that some artists feel about not making work is, you know, definitely don't be hard on yourself, right? That yet there are a lot of creative solutions happening in relationship to the quarantine, and how we as a community can come together and provide, you know, every Thursday live studio or exhibition visits through Artfare, or maybe even using different materials within your own work and becoming resourceful and taking on a new kind of reinvention of your craft, which I know that I've had to do personally, yet finding outlets like, you know, something like this. But also I know that you guys did a really nice quick turnaround in response to COVID-19 and the closure and cancellations of galleries and exhibition openings and closings. Can you possibly share that
The virtual
little tour that you did before all these online viewing rooms started infiltrating our inboxes?
Yeah, I was like, let's just do this really fast. And I made it on SketchUp. Wait, how do we?
I'll share it.
You'll share it? Okay. I think it was also just sort of, you know, trying to daydream about being back in this space, honestly, and how to get there.
Yeah, so this is a SketchUp replica of the exhibition that we just toured. Yeah, so that was that, and is
Stop sharing.
Yeah. So that was the virtual tour that we did of the space, and one of the reasons that we did that is because this exhibition opened right before the New York lockdown happened. So we actually had people in the physical gallery. There was stuff in the news, but there was no official lockdowns. There was no forcing of businesses to close or social distance at that point. But we had hand sanitizer at the gallery. We were being very cautious, all this stuff. And then within 2 weeks, you know, things rapidly changed. So we wanted to make sure to do our due diligence for the artists to make sure that people could actually see the work. So we made that virtual SketchUp, but then we were also throwing around ideas of, you know, what do we do now that we can't have a physical space? Do we do an online viewing room? Do we do, you know, something in virtual space, augmented reality, whatever it might be? And I think there were so many galleries struggling with that same question around that time that it became kind of an overabundance of things happening. You know, it was kind of like so many online exhibitions and different things that we actually felt like what you guys were doing with Artfare, doing these talks through Zoom was actually more interesting than just looking at a static web page where you could kind of act like you're going through, but not really being at the physical gallery. Can you still hear us, Caroline?
We can't hear. Oh, she's.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah, you're muted.
Okay. Oh, share my screen. Okay.
Oh.
Don't share my screen. Okay, so we'll share the screen just one more time. Yeah, sorry to the folks that are on Instagram
Can you
Live.
flip it?
Yeah, try and flip it just so you guys can see. So this is the virtual tour of the gallery happening here. Yeah. Okay.
So Carolina, you had asked, you know, how we had put these artists together, all three of them for the Jester Plays Dead. Is she gonna unmute herself?
Yeah.
Unmute her.
Here, we'll unmute you if we can.
Oh, because you did the screen share.
So.
Are you off screen share?
Yeah.
Oh no. All right, I'm gonna let you figure it out. Can you just exit out of that? Okay, sorry for all the confusion here. But so you had asked, you can't unmute her?
No.
Oh shoot, maybe we can do it from here. You had asked how we'd put all three of these artists together, and conceptually it all worked out, and oh no. Okay. Anyway, what I wanted to say was all three of the artists that are in the Jester Plays Dead are dating artists that we've worked with or have known in a close vicinity of.
Caroline, is it cool if we just keep talking? Okay.
How do we get
Great.
to the queue? Does anyone have any questions? Where are they? Type them in the chat. Babe, you got to take over.
Yeah, I got it. So since we have our main host muted here, we're going to go ahead and accept questions via the chat, either in Zoom. You can use the chat down at the bottom. Feel free to submit any questions you have about the artist or about the exhibition. And then also we're taking questions on Instagram Live. Hello, everyone. We can see you in there. So
you can also just say hi and let us know where you're logging in from. Are you guys continuing to program your gallery space? Did you have to cancel your summer or fall shows? We put some things on hold. We did have a solo show that was supposed to be the next show. This artist named Tamara Santibanas, who is based out of New York, and besides being a great visual artist, she's also a fantastic tattoo artist as well. So we were planning to do a solo show with her. That was going to be the next thing. Yes, Tamara's work is amazing. Thanks, Lauren. And, you know, we were also hoping to do Detroit Art Week, and that was supposed to be, I think, in June or July, and we just got word that that's been canceled. And that's a fair that I think is on the second year of happening, and they do a whole sort of section about emerging curators. So until now, we don't know when that's going to happen. Are you going to show her work?
Yeah, I'm just going to post in the chat here in case anyone wants to check out Tamara's work. Okay.
What is going on?
And she's back.
Okay.
What happened?
But now you can still see us. Yeah, okay, cool.
There we go. Jeez Louise. Well, thank you for everyone's patience on that one. I think things just got a little confused when we have a couple co-hosts happening and screen shares and freezing and such. But never fear, we're still recording through all of the technical difficulties.
we got a question on Instagram. It says, as curators, what do you want to see when you log into an artist's website? What makes a good site versus a bad one? That's a great question. Mm-hmm. Do you want to answer what you think? Okay, I'll answer. Oh, right, I'll look in here. Okay. Easy navigation is always great. However, you know, I don't want too much graphic design on there unless they are a graphic designer. So just a little bit. I mean, I don't mind like a white background and just here's the image and then, you know, a small caption underneath. A short artist statement's okay. I don't know if I really need it. And a CV is awesome, or a written bio. Just sort of keep it simple, I think. Unless you are, an artist that is working digitally or in video or things like that, and that's sort of your style. So I guess whatever's reflective of your style and how you would install a show.
Mm-hmm. I think from my perspective, an artist website is important, but Instagram and social media is becoming even more important than an artist website. Many of the artists that we've shown, we find their work on Instagram, which I think 5 years ago might have sounded a little superficial, but now it's just kind of the business. It's how most people communicate. It's how most people get their work out there. And whether it's social media or your website, I think one thing, and I should also preface this by saying that both of us are artists as well. We both, went to art school and have had studio practices. In my younger days as an artist, I think I had this desire to not share too much and to kind of keep something sacred, so that people would be intrigued to kind of want to find out more about the work. But the more that I've been on the gallerist side of things, I actually want to know as much as I can about the artist and see their best work right up front so I can make the decision myself. I don't like artists who are like making me do the work to click through their website until I get to something that is their like masterpiece or something like that. So I think what I would say to artists is that they should really put all their best work out there, document it well, and make sure that it's thoughtful in terms of presentation. Yeah.
Those are really great remarks from both of you. And Michael, you kind of tapped into something that I was interested in asking too, because having earned your master's of fine arts 10 plus years ago now, I just like to remind myself, we graduated the same class. So, and, we kind of, thinking about that practice as an artist, and what did spur you into becoming more of a curator and as someone that is basically putting together shows and as a gallerist, opposed to just making work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think our reasons for getting into galleries is a little different, but for me, I think that it was really kind of happenstance. I'd actually wanted to do a gallery way back in Chicago and never had the space, never had the time or the drive for it. And then I found myself in a situation where I was living in a large warehouse loft with other roommates who are artists and very cool, flexible people. I think you can't really have an apartment gallery unless you have cool roommates, or roommates that are at least cool with what you're doing. So I think the right circumstances presented themselves, and I had a discussion with my roommates. I'd just gotten back from a trip overseas, and I was just like feeling like I wanted to change and I wanted to do something creative that was different from the collaborative artwork I was making with my twin brother. And I decided to create this gallery in my living room. So I think part of it was like the space first, as again, kind of the empty vessel that could be filled with something that's a possibility. And then once I started curating, the first thing that I thought when I created the gallery is that some of the best shows that I've seen were curated by artists and not by traditional curators. So I like this idea of coming at things from having an artistic and studio practice background and kind of meeting the artists where they are and giving them platform. So I feel even to this day that a lot of the artists that we show, we're giving them a platform to take the next step in their careers, or get more exposure or get more press or get sales or whatever it might be. And that's really important as an artist, and that I know that from personal experience because I was given those opportunities in the past and was very thankful for that. So I want to pay it forward to others. So I think a long way of saying it is that it was kind of happenstance, but then also striking while the iron's hot and just seeing what the other side of things was like being a curator, being a gallerist.
Yeah, it does put things in perspective, doesn't it? One of my colleagues actually has a great question about, you definitely were thinking on your toes with the virtual gallery tour, yet I know that you've developed programming in a virtual way as well, doing artist interviews and so on and so forth. Did that, Kelly Schur asks, is that something that you had done prior to the pandemic? Or do you think, also my question would be, do you think that you would continue doing this kind of programming post quarantine?
So I actually you're talking about the 3D tour for the show?
No, the artist talks.
Or the artist talks. Oh, I don't know. I think that a lot of people are talking about, like, you know, for their own spaces to continue this virtual life. It's hard to say. I think it just depends on, you know, how long this happens for, and then, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how engaged we will be in that capacity once we're, you know, escaped from our cages and can like go out into the world and, you know, see work in person and chat with people and have that community. So, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it if it made sense conceptually, but I'm not quite sure, you know, the way we're continuing our dialogue for Selenas Mountain at the moment, that's something that I think that we'll all need. I mean, I think we might need more actual, you know, physical sort of presence with each other. But I don't even know when we'll be able to do that. So it's hard to say. Yeah.
It certainly is. I mean, even the thought of returning to normal, our normal will have very much changed in relationship to experiences that we're having right now. Yet the ideas that, do you think you will continue putting on live exhibitions in your space? And if I missed that when I was blanked out, I apologize, but I'm thinking about that myself. You know, as a curator, am I still interested in seeing shows just online? Or I noticed a gallery that I respect a bunch recently put together a very elaborate exhibition for only an online show. And I thought, we're fortunate enough to have resources. They're a mid-tier gallery. I do love their program. Yet I also question, you know, is it futile if no one's going to see the work in person? I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen that with some galleries as well, and I won't name names, but I think in one respect it's a really interesting idea because it's more akin to conceptual art, where, like you said, if a tree falls in the woods, you know, if there's an exhibition that was actually created in the physical and then documented well and then posted online, the feeling of that is more similar to an exhibition. Like maybe, you know, I missed the opening, but I can still catch the install shots online. That's much different than an online exhibition where it's literally just JPEGs that you scroll through. But then the thing about that I have a little bit of a problem with is the fact that you still have to have art handlers coming to the gallery, putting their lives at risk. And we are talking about putting their lives at risk, because to go from Brooklyn to Manhattan right now, you're exposing yourself to the virus. So I'm a little bit wary about that. I mean, we don't have a staff of art handlers or gallery assistants that work with us. It's just the two of us.
We kind of have one.
And one great gallery assistant who's interned with us. But
she had to leave New York because of the pandemic.
Yeah, so I think there's ethical concerns with hiring labor to create a physical thing that nobody's going to see just for kind of the conceptual component of it during this time. But I do think that it's an interesting problem solving. Yeah.
It certainly changed the way that prior to mandatory social distance, the writers and I've heard advisors and collectors say things like, oh, I saw it on Instagram, or I saw it online. I already saw the show. I saw that. Yeah, I saw it online. I think that it kind of, it does, I don't know, in seeing it online now is almost a legitimate way to look at work, or selling online is more legitimate way to sell your work. I mean, things are changing so rapidly, yet we can't all be traditionalists if we want to think on our toes and manage, some creative problem solving. And so your participation in Artfare, these works are on the platform. We're hoping that people do inquire and ask about the artist, ask about the work, ask about being curated in possibly another show, or selling through these electronic means. Is this your first experience working at selling work online, or have you kind of steered clear from that up until now?
No, I mean, we're definitely open to selling through any channel that is open.
Instagram has been great for us for selling work, and we've had works on ArtSpace.
And basic email inquiries, someone who's interested in the artist's work but can't come to the show because they're not physically located in New York. So we definitely have different channels, and we don't really have a hierarchy. We try to make sales as best we can. But I do think that because of the pandemic, it is legitimizing things that might have had a stigma in the past. I think, online platforms for selling art had a stigma maybe a few years ago, but now there's no question that, you can buy work online without ever seeing it. You can especially invest in artists that are becoming popular, and maybe you can't make it to their show in New York or LA, and now no one can make it anywhere. So there's a different set of values, I think. But I think that because everyone's stuck at home, there's a new legitimacy to a lot of different online platforms. I work in online education for my day job, and that's something that had a stigma a few years ago, and now all of our courses are taught online. Or telehealth is something that, has been around for many, many years, but nobody's made use of it. And now people are using telehealth all the time, and that industry is booming as well. So I think that it's just going to change the landscape of every industry, not just the art market. And we just need to roll with the punches and embrace that change, because, there's no reason to push against it.
Definitely. When I just kind of logistical questions now, I know you were kind enough to keep this show up, an extension of the show, right? Are you going to hold on to the work prior to, longer? Will the show be up indefinitely? I know I kind of already mentioned this. And again, do you have shows planned for the future in the case that we can open up, or in the case that we'll continue to be closed?
Yeah, so we definitely have been in touch with our artists for this exhibition, letting them know that we're keeping up specifically for this event. And right now there's, safety concerns in terms of can we, get the work back to the artists safely so that they're not endangered, the work's not endangered, all that good stuff. And in terms of future shows, we also have been in touch with the artists that we've committed to that had to have their shows pushed back, and just kind of said, we still want to work with you. We could do, virtual creative solutions in the meantime, but we still want to have your exhibition. So we do have hopes of continuing and having a physical show some point down the road. But it's also hard to say, a lot of it's dependent on how long everything goes. Tomorrow is May 1st, and there's a lot of galleries that are, trying to strike against paying their rent because they can't afford to pay it. And a lot of galleries are going to close just during this 2-month period. So I think it's hard to say with things like physical space where you have to pay rent, you have to pay overhead. If you're not able to make sales, how do you justify that? But we're going to do our best to support our artists and find creative ways to get their work out there, and also think of creative solutions to continue that platform in any way that we can.
Yeah, we're going to do some more Zoom artist talks next week on, I think, Thursday, right? You said Thursday. We're going to have Vincent Dermody and, sort of a presentation of his work. do you want to pull up or send you can send a link to everyone of his work. So we're planning as we go, but yeah, we did have to postpone our show that was coming up after the show, and then we had another show after that we were planning for as well, and just, you know, and they're all shows we want to do, and we probably will do when it makes sense, you know, for everyone. But yeah, just laying low on the physical contact at the moment.
Yeah, but I think one thing that is also kind of a glimmer of hope during this time, there's a really interesting article by Magda Sawan from Postmasters Gallery that was in ArtNet, where she talked about the fact that alternative spaces, artist-run spaces, and smaller galleries are actually going to survive the storm better than larger blue-chip galleries. And the reason for that is because they're scrappy, they're used to doing things on their own, they're used to being creative and working with a small budget. And I think that that's really important to keep in mind, because whether it's this virus or a natural disaster or you know, mass shootings, there's lots of things that have been disrupting our lives over the past several years that are terrible, but art lives on. We'll continue to, you know, have shows or support artists. And I think it's important to think about, what does this mean now as we enter back into a new normal society? Like, one thing that was proposed in that article was that collectors will be forced to kind of go to galleries in their neighborhood. You know, they'll be forced to go out in Brooklyn and go to the small galleries because they can't get to Manhattan, or they'll be forced to, you know, buy work from artists that they can access or go through the online route. So I think it's going to change the landscape of what's happening online. I'll try to find the link and post it.
I think the article also said, you know, as we're let back around public spaces, that smaller galleries will make more sense because there'll be less people there than a larger sort of mega gallery as we come out of the pandemic.
I'm going to post in the chat for everyone.
Yeah, it was an incredibly powerful read. And I know that, you know, our time is creeping up on us, and I want to offer the opportunity for our guests to ask questions themselves, and certainly about the artwork. I noticed a couple artists join in the show, join the chat room, and I really value their participation as well. But if folks do get an opportunity to read that ArtNet article, it was really fantastic. And perhaps we can look at one of the works. A couple of people on the Instagram Live were asking about Seneca Weintraub's work, the large painting. Can we look at that a little bit more carefully in there? Because there seems to be some really fantastic underlying symbolism, let alone the setting itself feels almost straight out of a Goya. And I'm wondering if you may have any more information about some of the references, the shapes and symbols, as well as the colors.
Yeah, there's definitely a Goya aspect to it, with this figure down here, Saturn eating his sons. The specific references for these works, Seneca hasn't shared, you know, what the specific references for all of them, but I do know that a lot of his work comes from various backgrounds, folklores, these kind of alternative myths. When we first did a studio visit with him in Philadelphia, he had a very strange children's toy that was from 1800s from an Amish family. And he's just very interested in folklore and outsider art, folk art, and bringing all those references into his material and making a new narrative. So I think for this work specifically, you know, we'd have to ask him what the main meaning of it is, but I think a lot of these works are kind of these forlorn characters, especially this one here. This one's called Animal Child. I really love this work, but it's just kind of a figure that's built up with oil paint, and it's It's kind of like a feral, almost Neanderthal type child out in the woods. And yeah, all the work has a hidden narrative that the artist hasn't shared with us, but there's reference points in all the work.
Mm-hmm. And the snakes in Over's very graphic, flat. Is that the canvas is natural? Is this an unprimed canvas, or is it?
Yes, this is actually linen.
Oh, linen.
And as you get up close, you can see it's actually painted paper. So this is actual paper.
Oh, collage.
Yeah, so it's collage on top of the linen. So this is all fresh linen, and then this is paper.
Mm.
And the source material for Dan's work, for this specific body of work, is all from Japanese kite making. So it's most evident in the piece in the top, but then also kind of the way that he's using almost the ribbon of the paper is meant to be a reference to Japanese kites.
Did you make the choice to hang it and install it in that kind of triptych up a notch, or was that the artist's decision?
Yeah, so we actually decided to hang it in this triptych, partially because of the content of the work, but also because a lot of the paintings in this show, as you can see, are the same size, which we weren't anticipating when we first did visits with all the artists. We were thinking that there'd be a kind of diversity of sizes, but then the main work that we selected just happened to be the same size. So in order to break things up a little bit, we tried to do these kind of groupings where we had Dan's work on the back wall, and then we had the two framed birch wax encaustics by Seneca, and then we had Edward's work on the far left to kind of give breathing room to all the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the square canvases or the two pieces that are at the end closest to Daniel's work, those are Seneca's as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can really see the humor in the gesture, I suppose, in the concept, in that far right one.
Mm-hmm.
And then is that that's on board? It's panel?
Yeah, it's panel cord birch.
Birch. Ooh, up close on that abstract one is on the left is just it's.
Yes, this piece is called Time Fishing. This is the one that I thought was the most psychedelic.
Mm-hmm. And were the artists able to come see the show in person, or was the lockdown already locked down before they could
Yes,
actually?
we actually had all the artists come to
No,
the
two of
opening,
them. Except for Dan Rizzo, or in Chicago, couldn't make it. But Seneca and Edward were here. It was actually the week of spring break, so I think everyone was installing for spring break and having shows and sort of lots of art events going on at that time. But
yep.
Is there another question? Can galleries have formats similar to Amazon where you can zoom in for a better look online? Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely some larger galleries that have really professionally done online viewing rooms where you can zoom into work, have detailed shots. I know that the Google Arts and Culture Project has that type of thing for museums. We don't have access to that technology right now, but doesn't mean we won't look into it in the future.
Yeah, we'll look into it, Mitchell.
Yeah.
Good idea.
So there's just a few minutes left. If anyone has any further questions, either on Zoom or on Instagram.
Yeah, hello. I'm Mitch.
Hey, Mitch.
Hi.
Hey, nice to meet you too, fellow Queens residents. I live in Forest Hills.
Oh, great.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'll definitely, you have a website, I'll go online, I'll sign up for your mailing list. I like to spread word of artists and gallerists, so I will definitely take a look. It's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
thank
question.
you. Yeah, great question.
And good roots from Bushwick. Those are good roots. It's a great
Yeah.
community. What?
Yeah, we like where we're located at.
Yeah.
There's a comment.
From Shoshana. It says, wonderful exhibition, Selenas Mountain. Thank you, Olivia and Michael. Tell Vincent Dermody I say hello. She went to SAC during undergrad back in the 90s. Yeah, so Vincent Dermody actually ran an amazing apartment gallery in the early 90s, late 2000s called Law Office with some other Chicago. And that's something we bonded over the first time that I had a solo exhibition with Vincent back in my previous apartment gallery. So, yeah.
And incidentally, Shoshana Weinberger is next for the live art fair studio visits.
Oh, great.
When is that?
We'll
Next
pass the baton on.
Thursday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. EST will be, hey, there she is. You want to say something, Shoshana?
I just wanted to say it's really nice to see some Chicago folk coming over to New York.
Yeah.
I feel like I wasn't born and raised in Chicago, but I left for art school in '91 and stayed there for 10 years. So it's just nice to see you guys making it happen and being first with virtual worlds and,
Yeah,
and this is a wonderful way to connect in this sort of weird COVID. So this is like my sanity every Thursday. So
Great.
anyway,
Well,
I just
pleasure
want to say
meeting
it's a great
virtually.
show. I came in a little late because I have two dogs that are, I think, 100 years old, and
yeah.
this world is they're strange. But anyway, I really love the work, and I hope you guys can maintain.
We will.
Yeah, we will. Thank
We
you.
have that Chicago, attitude. So I think
Yeah, we can deal
we'll
with
be around
negative
for,
20.
we'll be around for a while, I think.
If you can deal with the cold, you can deal with anything, right?
Yeah, we'll make it work. There's a will, there's a way. We'll do it.
Right.
And there's a question on Instagram Live, and it's about to time out, so I'm just going to answer it really quick. It says, I just saw this guilty pleasure show on Bravo called Gallery Girls. Olivia's told me about that before. Are there any suggestions for someone wanting to invest in art on a limited budget? Definitely. We have artwork for sale, all types, all sizes.
All different price
all different price ranges. And a lot of the artists that we work with have drawings or works on paper. So even if you can't afford a painting or a photograph or something larger, you can always invest in prints or drawings. And that's a good way to start your collection. And once we started our gallery, we actually started to build a pretty robust collection ourselves. So we're collectors too. So.
Definitely. And on Artfare, we've been running a lot of specials that it's special work. It's not so much that the work is devalued at sale level at all, but the work is $500 and less. And every week we're highlighting new artists that are bringing original artwork to the platform where you can buy it now. There's some incredible work by Tahir Kamali that's only $200. And there's just a lot of prints, yes, but original artwork that you can get right now, and that supports artists more than I think it seems obvious that it supports artists, but currently Artfare is offering 100% of the proceeds of the retail value of the work to the artists and galleries that are presenting the work. Through this pandemic, we're really working hard to make it easier and not harder for artists to live off their artwork. And so I know Johanna Herr has work on her profile right now that's going all to donation. 100% of it's going to donation for her 501c3 Daughters Rising. And so there's some incredible opportunities, and you're not only doing it for a great cause, you're helping artists survive during this pandemic. So we really appreciate it. Appreciate you too. We're coming up.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Joined
Oh,
and
Carolyn, I have a question for you.
Pardon?
Carolyn, I have
Carolina?
a question. Yes, okay, so a year ago, February is when I came to the inaugural art fair pop-up.
Fantastic. Thank you everyone for listening. I'm gonna close up the meeting. It's 1900. Thanks for your support, Mitch. And we will be here next week at 6 p.m. to 7 with Shoshana. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks.